Hey, if you're thinking about buying rural land, at some point you're going to have to figure out how you're going to power the place. And that question comes up more than almost anything else. So let's talk about it. Welcome back to the Land Buyer's Guide. I'm Scott Thomas, founder of landparker.com, where we sell discounted rural vacant land with owner financing that's actually affordable. We're talking options as low as $100 down and $100 a month. Today we're getting into something really practical. Solar generators versus gas generators for off-grid living. Which one makes sense for your situation? Let's dig in. So first, just to make sure we're on the same page, what are we even comparing here? A solar generator is basically a system that captures sunlight through solar panels, stores that energy in a battery bank, and then converts it into usable electricity. These range from small portable units you can throw in the back of a truck all the way up to full whole home systems with serious battery storage. A gas generator, on the other hand, runs on gasoline, propane, or diesel. It produces power through combustion. These have been around forever. They're everywhere, and most people already have a general idea of how they work. You pour fuel in, you pull a cord or push a button, and you get power. Both are legitimate options. Neither one is automatically the right answer. It really comes down to your land, your lifestyle, and what you're trying to do out there. Now let's talk about cost, because that's usually the first thing people want to know. Solar generators have a higher upfront price tag, especially if you're going big with multiple panels and a solid battery bank. That can feel like a lot when you're already spending money on land. But here's the thing. Once it's set up, your fuel cost is basically zero. Sunlight is free. So over time, that initial investment starts to look a lot more reasonable. Gas generators are cheaper to buy up front. You can get a decent unit without spending a ton of money. But then you've got ongoing fuel costs, and those add up fast, especially if you're relying on it as your main power source. And if your land is remote, you're hauling fuel out there regularly. That's time, that's effort, and fuel prices move around on you. Here's a little exercise worth doing before you decide. Estimate how many hours a day you'd need to run a gas generator to cover your basic energy needs. Then do the fuel math on that. For a lot of people, that number is genuinely surprising. Over a 5 to 10 year window, solar tends to be more cost effective for people living off-grid full-time or even seasonally. But gas makes sense in certain situations. We'll get to that. Let's talk reliability because both systems can be reliable. They just have different weak spots. Solar depends on the sun. That sounds obvious, but it's worth thinking through. If you go through a stretch of cloudy weather, or if your land has a lot of tree cover, your ability to generate and store energy is going to take a hit. How long you can run on stored battery power without sunshine depends on how big your battery bank is and how much you're drawing from it. Gas generators don't have that problem. As long as you have fuel, you have power. Doesn't matter what the weather's doing. That predictability is genuinely useful for emergencies, for extended cloudy stretches, for times when you've got higher power demands than usual. And honestly, this is why a lot of experienced off-grid folks end up using both. Solar is the main system, gas is the backup. We'll come back to that in a minute. One thing worth looking into before you size a solar system, find out the average peak sun hours for the area where your land is. Some regions get a lot of consistent sun, others not so much. And if your land is heavily shaded, that matters a lot when you're figuring out how many panels you actually need. Now let's get into maintenance because this is one that people sometimes overlook until they're already out in the middle of nowhere dealing with a problem. Solar systems have very few moving parts. That's a big deal. Less to break, less to maintain. You're mostly talking about keeping your panels clean, doing periodic battery checks, and keeping an eye on your inverter. It's not a zero maintenance situation, but it's pretty low key compared to the alternative. Gas generators need more regular attention. Oil changes, air filter replacements, spark plug checks, carburetor cleaning. And if you're storing the generator for a few months, you need to deal with fuel stabilization, or you might come back to a machine that doesn't want to start. If you stay on top of it, they run great. If maintenance slips, performance drops, and lifespan shortens. So if you want something you can mostly set and forget, solar has a real advantage there. If you're the kind of person who's comfortable with small engine maintenance and actually enjoys that stuff, gas is totally manageable. Let's talk about noise and emissions for a second, because this one matters more to some people than others. Solar generators run silently, zero noise, zero emissions during operation. If you're out there to enjoy peace and quiet, or if you've got neighbors within earshot, that silence is a real quality of life thing. It's hard to put a dollar amount on it until you've sat next to a running gas generator for an hour. Gas generators are loud and they produce exhaust. They need to run outdoors or somewhere with good ventilation. You'll need to think about where you place it on your property and what's downwind. It's manageable, but it's a factor. And while we're on the topic, it's worth checking local regulations before you set anything up. Some rural areas have noise ordinances, and there can be rules around fuel storage too. Nothing that should scare you off, just worth knowing ahead of time. Portability is another thing to consider depending on how you're using the property. Smaller solar generators are really portable, great for camping on your land while you're building things out, powering a job site, running a tiny home on wheels. Larger fixed solar systems are obviously not going anywhere, but they can power a full homestead. Gas generators also come in a wide range. Small ones are easy to move around. Big standby units are permanent installations. So both options have a range of sizes depending on what you need. All right, so which one is actually right for you? Here's how I'd think about it. Solar tends to make more sense if your land gets good sun exposure throughout the year, if you want to keep ongoing costs low, if noise and emissions matter to you, and if you're planning to be out there long term. It also makes a lot of sense if hauling or storing fuel regularly just isn't practical for where your property is located. Gas tends to make more sense if you need affordable power right now, while you're still planning a bigger system if your land is heavily shaded or in a region that doesn't get a lot of sun. If you've got occasional high power needs that would require a very large battery bank to cover, or if you're using the property seasonally and want something simple to deploy and put away. Now, the hybrid approach. This is honestly where a lot of people end up landing, and it's worth thinking about from the beginning rather than arriving at it after some trial and error. The idea is pretty straightforward. You use solar as your everyday power source. That keeps your costs low, keeps things quiet, and handles your routine needs. Then you keep a gas generator on hand for backup, for extended cloudy stretches, for high demand situations, for emergencies. You're not burning fuel every day, but you're not stuck either. One practical thing to keep in mind if you go this route when you're sizing your solar system, think about what you'd actually want the gas generator to cover. That helps you figure out the right battery storage capacity. It also helps you avoid overspending on either side of the setup. Here's the takeaway from all of this. You don't have to have this perfectly figured out before you buy land, but it's really helpful to at least start thinking about your power plan early, before you're standing on the property trying to figure it out on the fly. Think about what your land looks like. Is it open and sunny or shaded by trees? What region is it in? How often do you plan to be out there? What are you actually going to need to power? Those questions will start pointing you in a direction. And if you're starting simple and scaling up as you go, that's a completely reasonable approach. A lot of people do exactly that. The fact that you're thinking about this stuff ahead of time already puts you in a much better position than most people who buy rural land and then figure it out later. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. If you're looking for affordable rural land with financing options that don't require perfect credit or a big chunk of cash up front, head over to landparker.com. We've got properties available with owner financing, some as low as $100 down and $100 a month. You can browse what's available, learn more about the land buying process, and reach out to us directly if you've got questions. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I'll catch you on the next one.